The Metabolic Apocalypse, 10 Agents of Liver Destruction. Deep within the body's filtration system, a silent epidemic is festering. Non-alcoholic fatty liver disease has evolved from a medical anomaly into a global catastrophe, driven by a modern diet weaponized against human biology. We are unknowingly coating our most vital organ in visceral sludge, inviting fibrosis and failure long before symptoms manifest. This is an investigation into specific compounds and commodities engineering this internal collapse. It begins with the most pervasive, liquid toxin currently flooding the global food supply.
The liquid toxin, sugary soft drinks, and the fructose bomb. To understand the catastrophic rise of non-alcoholic fatty liver disease, Nafld, in the modern era, one must first confront the ubiquitous, effervescent presence of the sugary soft drink. It is the defining artifact of the contemporary diet, a brightly colored carbonated cylinder that represents the single most efficient delivery system for liver-damaging caloric density ever invented by human industry. While often dismissed simply as empty calories or a contributor to dental caries, the soda can is in reality a vessel of biochemical warfare against the hepatic system. The primary agent of this destruction is fructose, a molecule that when consumed in liquid concentration behaves less like a nutrient and more like a chronic low-dose hepatotoxin. Unlike glucose, which is the primary energy source for every cell in the human body, from the firing neurons of the brain to the contracting muscles of the heart, fructose is a metabolic burden borne almost exclusively by the liver. When a person consumes a standard 20-ounce soda, they are not merely ingesting energy, they are initiating a complex, damaging physiological events that the human body never evolved to handle. The biochemistry of this assault is distinct and devastating. When glucose enters the bloodstream, it is regulated by insulin, a hormone that acts as a traffic controller, directing sugar into cells for energy or storage as glycogen. Fructose, however, bypasses this regulatory checkpoint. It does not stimulate insulin secretion directly, nor does it suppress ghrelin, the hunger hormone, effectively rendering the calories invisible to the body's satiety signaling systems. Upon ingestion, fructose is shunted directly to the liver via the portal vein. In small amounts, such as those found in whole fruit, where the sugar is encased in fiber, the liver can manage this load, but the modern soft drink delivers a tsunami of high fructose corn syrup, HFCS, or sucrose, that overwhelms the liver's metabolic capacity. This phenomenon triggers a process known as de novo lipogenesis, literally the creation of new fat. Because the liver mitochondria cannot burn the fructose fast enough to produce energy, the excess substrate is rapidly converted into triglycerides. This is not merely fat storage, it is the genesis of visceral sludge that begins to accumulate within the liver cells themselves,
Turning the organ from a lean, efficient filter into a swollen, fatty reservoir. The historical context of this metabolic tragedy is rooted in the geopolitical and agricultural shifts of the 1970s. Before this era, sweetened beverages were occasional treats, and they were sweetened primarily with sucrose derived from cane or beets. However, rising tariffs and sugar prices, combined with agricultural policies in the United States that heavily subsidized corn production, led to the widespread adoption of high fructose corn syrup. This liquid sweetener was cheaper, easier to transport, and possessed a higher solubility than granulated sugar, making it the perfect industrial ingredient. Beverage giants seized upon this economic advantage, increasing portion sizes while keeping prices artificially low. The big gulp culture was born, normalizing the consumption of 32, 44, or even 64 ounces of liquid sugar in a single sitting. This shift coincided precisely with the inflection point in obesity and liver disease rates. We essentially re-engineered the global food environment to favor a macronutrient profile that promotes hepatic steatosis, and we marketed it as happiness, refreshment, and the pause that refreshes, masking the cellular violence occurring with every sip. Beyond the immediate creation of triglycerides, the metabolism of liquid fructose inflicts collateral damage through the depletion of adenosine triphosphate, ATP, the cellular energy currency. The enzymatic breakdown of fructose is unregulated and rapid, consuming phosphate groups so aggressively that it depletes ATP levels in liver cells. This creates a state of transient energy shock, triggering the degradation of nucleotides and the subsequent production of uric acid. High uric acid levels are not only responsible for gout, but are also potent inducers of mitochondrial oxidative stress. This stress impairs the liver's ability to oxidize fatty acids, creating a vicious cycle. The liver is forced to make more fat while simultaneously losing the ability to burn it. This biochemical deadlock is the engine of NAFLD. The accumulation of intracellular fat leads to lipotoxicity, where the presence of excess lipids causes cellular dysfunction and inflammation. Over time, this chronic inflammation can progress to non-alcoholic steatohepatitis, NASH, a more severe form of the disease characterized by ballooning liver cells and the onset of fibrosis or scarring.
The pediatric implications of the soft drink epidemic are perhaps the most harrowing aspect of this investigation. For the vast majority of human history, fatty liver disease was a condition reserved for middle-aged alcoholics. Today, pediatric hepatologists regularly diagnose NAFLD in children as young as 10 or 12 years old. This is a direct consequence of the juice box and soda culture that begins in toddlerhood. A child's liver, which is smaller and still developing, is disproportionately affected by the fructose load found in sodas and sweetened beverages. The sheer velocity at which liquid sugar hits the liver is crucial here. Without the fiber matrix of whole fruit to slow absorption, the fructose hits the portal vein with the impact of an intravenous injection. This rapid influx spikes hepatic fat production immediately. We are witnessing the emergence of a generation that may develop cirrhosis and require liver transplants in their 30s and 40s, not due to alcohol or viral hepatitis, but due to the lifelong consumption of Mountain Dew, cola, and sweetened iced teas. Furthermore, the addictive properties of these beverages ensure that the cycle of damage is self-perpetuating. The combination of sugar and caffeine found in many soft drinks creates a powerful dopamine response in the brain's reward centers, similar to the mechanisms activated by drugs of abuse. This neurochemical reward creates a craving loop that overrides homeostatic controls. The sugar crash that follows the initial spike leads to lethargy and a craving for quick energy, driving the consumer back to the soda can. This is compounded by the high salt content in many sodas, which is masked by the sweetness. The salt triggers thirst, which the consumer attempts to quench with more soda, ingesting more sugar and salt in a loop designed to maximize consumption. From a metabolic standpoint, the body is trapped. The liver becomes insulin resistant, meaning it stops responding to the hormone signal to stop producing glucose. Consequently, the pancreas pumps out more insulin to compensate. High circulating insulin levels further lock the body into fat storage mode, making it nearly impossible to mobilize the fat already stored in the liver. The global reach of the soft drink industry means that this is no longer just a Western problem, it is a pandemic. As developing nations undergo nutritional transitions, the influx of cheap,
sugary beverages often precedes the arrival of adequate healthcare or nutritional education. In countries like Mexico, where soda consumption is among the highest in the world, liver disease and type 2 diabetes have become leading causes of death, intertwined in a fatal metabolic embrace. The cultural integration of soda into daily meals, celebrations, and even religious rituals in some regions has cemented its status, making public health interventions incredibly difficult. The soda industry's marketing machine has successfully embedded its product into the fabric of social life, obscuring the medical reality that these drinks are the primary drivers of the most prevalent liver disease in human history. To consume a sugary soft drink is to voluntarily introduce a metabolic disruptor into the body, one that initiates a sequence of molecular events leading directly to the infiltration of fat into the liver, setting the stage for decades of chronic disease.
2. The ancient poison, alcohol, and the hepatic overload. While the rise of sugary beverages represents a modern industrial assault on the liver, the second agent of destruction is humanity's oldest drug, alcohol. Although the overarching topic is non-alcoholic fatty liver disease, or NAFLD, it is scientifically impossible to discuss liver steatosis without analyzing the profound and direct toxicity of ethanol. The distinction between alcoholic and non-alcoholic fatty liver is often merely a matter of patient history. Physiologically, the endpoint, a liver choked by fat and inflammation, is strikingly similar. Furthermore, in the modern diet, alcohol and sugar often work in a terrifying synergy, accelerating liver damage far beyond what either could achieve alone. Alcohol is not a nutrient, it is a solvent, a cleaning agent, and a fuel, but to the human body, it is strictly a toxin that must be neutralized immediately, taking precedence over all other metabolic functions. When alcohol enters the system, the liver halts the oxidation of fats and carbohydrates to focus entirely on clearing the ethanol, effectively hitting the pause button on metabolism and shifting the body into a state of fat storage. The biochemistry of alcohol metabolism is a messy oxidative process that generates highly reactive byproducts. The primary pathway involves the enzyme alcohol dehydrogenase, or ADH, which converts ethanol into acetaldehyde. Acetaldehyde is a nightmare molecule. It is significantly more toxic than alcohol itself and is a known carcinogen. It binds to proteins within the cell, changing their structure and function, and triggers an immune response that leads to inflammation. Under normal circumstances, acetaldehyde is quickly converted into acetate by a second enzyme, aldehyde dehydrogenase, or ALDH. However, during bouts of heavy drinking, this system is overwhelmed. Acetaldehyde accumulates, causing direct damage to the hepatocyte structures, including the mitochondria. This mitochondrial damage is critical because these organelles are the power plants of the cell, responsible for burning fat. When they are damaged by acetaldehyde, the liver's ability to oxidize fatty acids is compromised, leading to the accumulation of triglycerides within the cell, the hallmark of fatty liver. Beyond the direct toxicity of acetaldehyde, the metabolic breakdown of alcohol fundamentally alters the chemical balance of the liver cell by changing the redox state.
The conversion of ethanol to acetate generates massive amounts of NADH, nicotinamide adenine dinucleotide reduced form, relative to NAD+. This skewed ratio acts as a powerful metabolic signal that mimics the state of having excess energy. It tells the cellular machinery that there is an abundance of fuel, thereby inhibiting the enzymes responsible for breaking down fatty acids and stimulating the enzymes responsible for building them. Essentially, the metabolism of alcohol forces the liver to synthesize fat and prevents it from burning the fat it already has. This chemically induced fat trap is why heavy drinkers develop steatosis, fatty liver, almost universally, often within days of a binge. While this early stage is reversible with abstinence, the constant bombardment of the liver with ethanol prevents recovery, solidifying the fat deposits and advancing the disease. The situation becomes even more dire when the primary ADH pathway is saturated. The liver then activates an emergency backup system known as the microsomal ethanol oxidizing system, MIOS, specifically the enzyme CYP2E1. While this pathway helps clear ethanol, it is chemically expensive and dangerous. The CYP2E1 reaction generates a torrent of reactive oxygen species, free radicals, that strip electrons from cellular structures, causing oxidative stress. This oxidative stress attacks the fat deposits already present in the liver, a process called lipid peroxidation. The resulting peroxidized lipids are highly inflammatory and toxic, triggering the recruitment of white blood cells to the liver. This marks the transition from simple fatty liver to alcoholic hepatitis, a state of severe inflammation and cellular necrosis. The liver cells begin to die and are replaced by scar tissue, initiating the slow, agonizing march towards cirrhosis. The cultural normalization of heavy drinking obscures the medical reality of what constitutes a toxic dose. In clinical terms, the threshold for alcohol-induced liver damage is surprisingly low, yet societal standards for consumption drifted toward excess. The functioning alcoholic, or the culture of wine moms and corporate happy hours, masks the chronic subclinical damage occurring in millions of livers. Many individuals who do not fit the stereotype of the destitute alcoholic are nonetheless subjecting their livers to daily high-dose ethanol exposure. The liver is a resilient organ capable of regenerating.
But it possesses a breaking point. The daily intake of 3 to 4 drinks keeps the liver in a perpetual state of oxidative stress and metabolic arrest. There is no recovery period, no window for the hepatocytes to repair the mitochondrial damage or clear the accumulated triglycerides. The modern drinker often consumes alcohol alongside a diet high in processed fats and sugars, creating a double hit phenomenon. The liver, already struggling to manage the fructose load from the modern diet, is completely incapacitated by the introduction of alcohol. This synergy between alcohol and obesity is a critical frontier in modern hepatology. We are seeing a blurring of the lines between alcoholic fatty liver disease and NAFLD, leading to new terminology like MET-OUT, metabolic dysfunction-associated steatotic liver disease with alcohol intake. A person who is overweight and consumes a moderate amount of alcohol is at a significantly higher risk of severe liver disease than a lean person drinking the same amount. The fat accumulation caused by diet sensitizes the liver to the toxic effects of alcohol. The inflammation is more severe, the fibrosis progresses faster, and the risk of hepatocellular carcinoma, liver cancer, skyrockets. Alcohol acts as an accelerant on the smoldering fire of metabolic syndrome. The refined carbohydrates and seed oils discussed later in this list prime the liver for damage, and alcohol provides the spark. Furthermore, the impact of alcohol extends to the gut-liver axis, a critical pathway for systemic health. Chronic alcohol consumption increases the permeability of the intestinal lining, a condition often referred to as leaky gut. This allows bacterial endotoxins, lipopolysaccharides, from the gut microbiome to escape into the bloodstream and travel directly to the liver via the portal vein. These toxins are potent activators of Kupffer cells, the resident macrophages, immune cells of the liver. When activated, Kupffer cells release a storm of inflammatory cytokines, including tumor necrosis factor alpha, TNFA, which further damage liver cells and promote cell death. This means that alcohol attacks the liver from two directions, directly through toxic metabolites and oxidative stress within the hepatocyte, and indirectly by recruiting the immune system to attack the organ from the outside. The tragic trajectory of alcohol-induced fatty liver is that it is entirely silent until it is catastrophic.
Fat accumulation in the liver causes no pain. The organ has no sensory nerve endings in its parenchyma. A person can harbor a liver that is 30% fat by weight, normal is less than 5%, and feel absolutely nothing. They may continue to drink heavily, unaware that they are teetering on the edge of irreversible fibrosis. By the time symptoms appear, jaundice, ascites, fluid buildup in the abdomen, or variceal bleeding, the window for simple lifestyle intervention has often closed. The liver, once a smooth regenerative marvel, has become a shriveled, nodular rock, incapable of filtering toxins or synthesizing vital proteins. In the grand scope of liver pathology, alcohol remains the heavyweight champion of destruction. Its ability to simultaneously disrupt lipid metabolism, generate carcinogenic byproducts, induce oxidative stress, and compromise the immune system makes it a uniquely potent hepatotoxin. When combined with the modern industrial diet, it creates a physiological environment where the liver is under constant siege. We have woven this toxin into the fabric of our celebrations, our relaxation, and our social bonding, ignoring the biological reality that every gram of ethanol demands a heavy price from our metabolic machinery. The fatty liver epidemic is not just a story of food, it is a story of how we have normalized the ingestion of a solvent that fundamentally dismantles the structural integrity of our most vital metabolic organ.
3. The industrial calorie, fast food, and the metabolic crash.
If sugary soft drinks are the liquid fuel of the fatty liver epidemic, the modern fast food ecosystem is the engine. The ubiquity of the combo meal, the burger, the side, and the drink, represents the single most successful caloric delivery system in human history, and, simultaneously, the most devastating assault on hepatic function ever devised. To understand why fast food is so uniquely damaging to the liver, one must look beyond the simple arithmetic of calories and investigate the complex architecture of the food itself. This is not merely food, it is an industrially engineered, hyperpalatable substance designed to bypass the body's evolutionary satiety signals, delivering a simultaneous load of refined carbohydrates, oxidized fats, and sodium that creates a state of immediate metabolic chaos. The fast food meal is the perfect storm for non-alcoholic fatty liver disease, NAFLD, because it hits the organ with every major trigger of lipogenesis, fat creation, at the exact same moment. The core of the fast food problem lies in the unnatural synergy of macronutrients. In the natural world, foods are rarely high in both fat and carbohydrates simultaneously. Nature provides high-fat foods, nuts, animal flesh, or high-carbohydrate foods, fruits, tubers, but almost never both in high concentrations. The human metabolism evolved to toggle between burning fat and burning sugar, a flexibility known as metabolic switching. The fast food burger, however, creates a biological deadlock. The bun, made of highly refined, bleached wheat flour, converts to glucose almost instantly upon ingestion, spiking insulin levels. This insulin spike opens the cellular doors for energy storage and shuts down fat burning. Simultaneously, the patty and the condiments deliver a massive load of dietary fat. Because insulin is high, the body cannot burn this fat for fuel. Instead, it is shunted directly into storage. The liver, awash in both glucose and fatty acids, is forced into a state of frantic de novo lipogenesis, converting the excess energy into triglycerides that accumulate within the liver cells themselves. We must also scrutinize the quality of the ingredients that comprise the standard fast food item. The meat in a fast food burger is often a composite of muscle tissue, connective tissue, and fillers, sourced from concentrated animal feeding operations, CAFOs.
These animals are typically raised on a diet of corn and soy, which alters the fatty acid profile of their meat, increasing the ratio of pro-inflammatory omega-6 fatty acids relative to anti-inflammatory omega-3s. When this meat is processed, it is often treated with preservatives and flavor enhancers that add to the chemical load the liver must detoxify. Furthermore, the condiments, the special sauces, ketchups, and sweet relishes, are essentially high-fructose corn syrup vehicles disguised as savory toppings. A single tablespoon of ketchup can contain more sugar than a cookie. When you consume a fast burger, you are not just eating meat and bread, you are ingesting a chemically formulated matrix designed to maximize dopamine release in the brain while wreaking havoc on the liver's filtration capacity. The historical trajectory of fast food mirrors the rise of chronic liver disease. The model pioneered by the McDonald brothers in the late 1940s, the speedy service system, applied the principles of the automotive assembly line to the kitchen. This demanded uniformity, stability, and speed. To achieve this, ingredients had to be stripped of their perishability. Nutrients, fiber, and enzymes, the very things that help the liver process food, are the enemies of shelf life. Consequently, fast food is defined by what is missing: fiber and micronutrients. Fiber is the liver's greatest ally. It slows the absorption of sugar, binds to bile acids, and feeds the gut microbiome. The fast food meal is almost entirely devoid of fiber. This acellular carbohydrate density means that the glucose hits the bloodstream with the velocity of an injection, overwhelming the liver's capacity to manage the load without resorting to fat storage. The impact of this diet on the gut-liver axis cannot be overstated. The fast food diet is lethal to the diversity of the gut microbiome. The heavy reliance on emulsifiers, artificial sweeteners, and processed seed oils decimates the populations of beneficial bacteria, like Akkermansia and bifidobacteria, that maintain the integrity of the intestinal lining. In their place, opportunistic inflammatory bacteria thrive. These dysbiotic bacteria produce endotoxins, specifically lipopolysaccharides, or LPS. In a healthy person, the gut barrier keeps these toxins contained. However, the fast food diet induces intestinal permeability, or leaky gut. These endotoxins leak into the portal circulation and travel directly to the liver.
Upon arrival, they trigger the liver's immune system, Kupffer cells, to release inflammatory cytokines. This means the liver of a daily fast food consumer is fighting a war on two fronts. It is struggling to manage the overwhelming influx of fat and sugar while simultaneously being bombarded by bacterial toxins from the gut. This chronic inflammation is the bridge between simple fatty liver and the scarring of cirrhosis. There is also the psychological and economic engineering of the supersize phenomenon. In the 1970s and 80s, industry executives realized that the marginal cost of the actual food, the soda syrup and the potatoes, was negligible compared to labor and overhead. Therefore, offering massive portion sizes for pennies more was a brilliant profit strategy. Physiologically, however, it was a catastrophe. The human stomach is elastic, and the brain's satiety signaling is easily overwritten by the combination of salt, sugar, and fat, the bliss point. Fast food is engineered to be eaten quickly, often before the hormonal signals of fullness, leptin and PYY, can reach the brain. This results in the consumption of 1,500 to 2,000 calories in a single sitting, often a whole day's worth of energy consumed in under 10 minutes. The liver simply cannot metabolize this tsunami of energy. It has no choice but to pack the excess energy into lipid droplets, swelling the hepatocytes and initiating the steatotic process. The global export of this dietary model has termed the phenomenon globesity, but it should perhaps be called global steatosis. As Western fast food chains penetrate markets in Asia, the Middle East, and Latin America, rates of NAFLD skyrocket, often outpacing the rise in obesity itself. This suggests that there is something intrinsic to the processed nature of the food, beyond just calorie count, that is toxic to the liver. It is likely the combination of advanced glycation end products, formed during the high heat processing of the food, the high sodium content, which drives fluid retention and hypertension, complicating liver blood flow, and the total lack of antioxidants to mitigate the oxidative stress. Ultimately, fast food represents the industrialization of human nutrition, a shift from biological inputs to chemical commodities. The liver, an organ that evolved over millions of years to process complex plants and lean game, is now tasked with filtering a stream of refined starch, industrial seed oils, and chemically reared meat.
It is a mismatch of evolutionary proportions. The convenience of the drive-thru comes at the cost of metabolic integrity. Every Happy Meal is a metabolic debt that the liver must pay, usually with interest in the form of inflammation and fibrosis. We have built a culture around the very foods that turn our internal organs into foie gras, normalizing a diet that is fundamentally incompatible with long-term human survival. 4. The chemical reactor, fried foods and the toxicity of heat. While fast food encompasses the broad architecture of the industrial meal, fried foods as a specific category warrants a distinct and granular investigation due to the unique biochemical violence that occurs within the deep fryer. The act of deep frying, submerging organic matter in boiling oil at temperatures exceeding 350 degrees Fahrenheit or 175 degrees Celsius, is not merely a cooking method. It is a chemical reaction that fundamentally alters the molecular structure of the food and the medium itself. When we discuss French fries, fried chicken, donuts, or fried calamari in the context of fatty liver disease, we are addressing the ingestion of lipid peroxidation products, or LPPs, and advanced glycation end products, or AGEs. The deep fryer is effectively a laboratory for creating hepatotoxins, turning benign ingredients into inflammatory grenades that target the liver's cellular machinery. The primary villain in this narrative is the oil itself, and more specifically, the degradation of that oil. Historically, frying was done with saturated fats like beef tallow or lard. These fats are solid at room temperature and, crucially, are chemically stable on the molecular level because they lack double bonds between carbon atoms. They resist oxidation. However, due to health campaigns in the late 20th century that demonized saturated fats, the food industry pivoted en masse to vegetable oils, soybean, corn, canola, and sunflower oils. These are polyunsaturated fats, or PUFAs, composed of multiple double bonds. While they are liquid and heart-healthy in their cold raw state, they are chemically fragile. When subjected to the extreme heat of a commercial fryer, these unstable double bonds break open and react with oxygen. This process, known as thermal oxidation, transforms the oil into a soup of free radicals and toxic byproducts. Among the most dangerous of these byproducts are aldehydes, specifically 4-hydroxynonenal, or 4-HNE. This compound is extremely toxic to liver cells. When you eat a serving of restaurant French fries, you're not just eating potatoes. You are consuming a sponge that has soaked up this oxidized aldehyde-rich oil. Once ingested, 4-HNE travels to the liver, where it attacks the mitochondria, the energy powerhouses of the cell. It uncouples the energy production process, causing the mitochondria to leak free radicals, which leads to further oxidative stress.
This mitochondrial dysfunction is a key driver of non-alcoholic steatohepatitis, NASH. The liver cells, unable to produce energy efficiently and under attack from free radicals, begin to die. The ingestion of thermally oxidized oils has been shown in animal models to induce fatty liver even in the absence of weight gain, proving that the damage is metabolic and toxicological, not just caloric. Furthermore, the commercial reality of the restaurant industry exacerbates this toxicity. Oil is expensive. Consequently, restaurants do not change their fryer oil after every batch. They use it repeatedly, often for days at a time. With every hour of heating, the oil degrades further, becoming more viscous and accumulating polar compounds. These polar compounds are breakdown products that have been linked to hypertension, oxidative stress, and liver toxicity. In many jurisdictions, health codes allow for a shockingly high percentage of polar compounds before the oil must be discarded. This means the golden crisp on your fried chicken is actually a polymer coating formed by the breakdown of plastic-like lipid structures. When you consume this, the liver must work overtime to detoxify these synthetic-like compounds, diverting resources away from normal metabolic functions and increasing the burden of oxidative stress. The interaction between the frying oil and the carbohydrate, the breading or the potato, creates another class of toxins, acrylamide.
This chemical forms via the Maillard reaction when starchy foods are cooked at high temperatures. Acrylamide is a known neurotoxin and a potential carcinogen, but its impact on the liver is equally concerning. It induces oxidative stress and depletes the liver stores of glutathione. Glutathione is the body's master antioxidant, the primary molecule the liver uses to neutralize toxins. By depleting glutathione, fried foods leave the liver defenseless against other insults, such as alcohol or environmental pollutants. It strips the liver of its armor. We must also consider the delivery mechanism of the breading on fried foods. Fried chicken, country fried steak, and onion rings are coated in refined white flour before being submerged in fat. This creates a macronutrient profile that is particularly efficient at generating visceral fat. The refined carb coating spikes blood sugar and insulin immediately. The oil provides a massive caloric surplus because the insulin is high.
The fat from the oil cannot be burned, it is shuttled directly into storage. But unlike fresh fat, this is oxidized, damaged fat. When the liver tries to incorporate these damaged fatty acids into its own cell membranes, the membranes become stiff and dysfunctional. This affects the fluidity of the cell, impairing the transport of nutrients and signals across the cell wall. The hepatocyte becomes rigid and inflamed, losing its ability to function as a dynamic metabolic filter. The cultural obsession with crunch drives this consumption. The sensory experience of fried food, the contrast between the crispy exterior and the moist interior, is one of the most prized textures in the culinary world. This texture is achieved through the rapid dehydration of the surface of the food, replaced by oil uptake. A properly fried French fry is essentially a structure where water has been replaced by fat. If that fat is a degraded omega-6 rich vegetable oil, the fry is a delivery vehicle for inflammation. The sheer volume of omega-6 fatty acids in the modern diet, largely driven by fried foods, has skewed the ratio of omega-6 to omega-3 in our cell membranes. An imbalance in this ratio promotes the production of pro-inflammatory eicosanoids, signaling molecules that keep the liver in a state of chronic low-grade inflammation. Moreover, the trans fat bans enacted in many countries, while well-intentioned, have not solved the problem of fried foods. While industrial trans fats, partially hydrogenated oils, have largely been removed, they have been replaced by interesterified fats and high oleic oils that, when abused in a commercial fryer, still produce a host of harmful oxidation products. The focus on a single molecule, trans fat, distracted from the broader issue that deep frying an unstable vegetable oils is inherently damaging to the food supply. We replaced a stable solid fat, lard or tallow, with unstable liquid plastics, and our livers are bearing the cost. The consumption of fried foods also triggers a systemic response that affects the liver indirectly. The high fat load delays gastric emptying, but paradoxically, the palatability overrides satiety, leading to overconsumption. The resultant is surging triglycerides in the bloodstream. Postprandial lipidemia can last for hours. If a person eats fried food for lunch and dinner, their blood remains turbid with fat almost 24/7. The liver is constantly bathed in excess lipids,
never getting a fasting window to clear the backlog. This relentless lipid exposure downregulates the LDL receptors, leading to higher cholesterol and further fat deposition in the liver. In the final analysis, the deep fryer is a relic of culinary history that has been weaponized by industrial chemistry. What was once a rare treat cooked in stable animal fats has become a daily staple cooked in degrading industrial solvents. The fried food item is a Trojan horse. It looks like nourishment, smells like comfort, but chemically it is a package of oxidative stress, aldehydes, and inflammatory signals. For the liver, processing a meal of fried chicken and French fries is akin to managing a toxic spill. It requires the depletion of vital antioxidants, the management of damaged cellular structures, and the storage of excess energy in the most dangerous place possible, the visceral cavity. To save the liver, we must rethink our relationship with the deep fryer and the volatile oils that bubble within it.
5. The preserved plague, processed meats, and the nitrate burden. When we step into the deli aisle or the breakfast buffet, we are entering a zone of culinary deception, where the term meat is often a legal technicality rather than a biological description. Entry number 5 on our list of liver-destroying agents is processed meat, a category that includes bacon, sausage, hot dogs, pepperoni, salami, and deli slices. While often celebrated as sources of protein or the savory centerpieces of cultural staples like the all-American breakfast, these products are, in reality, chemically altered biological matrices. They represent the industrialization of animal protein, transformed from fresh muscle tissue into shelf-stable, hyper-palatable slabs of toxicity. For the liver, the organ tasked with filtering the blood and managing lipid metabolism, processed meats represent a multi-pronged assault involving sodium overload, oxidative stress from additives, and a particularly dangerous form of saturated fat delivery. The consumption of these foods is strongly correlated not just with colorectal cancer, a well-publicized risk, but with the rapid development of non-alcoholic fatty liver disease, NAFLD, and insulin resistance. To understand the hepatic toxicity of processed meat, one must first dissect the chemical preservation process, specifically the use of nitrates and nitrites. Sodium nitrite, NaNO2, is the industry's weapon of choice against botulism and the key to maintaining that vibrant, unnatural pink hue in cured meats. Without it, bacon would be gray, and salami would oxidize into an unappetizing brown.
However, when these nitrates enter the acidic environment of the human stomach or are exposed to the high heat of a frying pan, they can undergo a chemical conversion into nitrosamines. These compounds are potent pro-oxidants. Upon absorption, they travel directly to the liver. Here, they induce significant oxidative stress, stripping electrons from stable molecules within the hepatocytes, liver cells. This oxidative damage triggers inflammation and can impair the liver's ability to respond to insulin. The liver is forced to detoxify these compounds while simultaneously managing the caloric load of the meal, creating a metabolic bottleneck that favors the accumulation of fat. Furthermore, the relationship between processed meats and liver health is heavily mediated by sodium. These products are essentially salt licks disguised as protein.
A few strips of bacon or a single hot dog can contain a significant percentage of the daily recommended limit for sodium. While we typically associate salt with blood pressure and heart health, its impact on the liver is equally profound. Excess sodium intake causes fluid retention and alters the hemodynamics of the liver, increasing the pressure within the portal vein system. More critically, recent research suggests that high sodium intake can directly stimulate the stiffening of liver tissue, fibrosis, by activating hepatic stellate cells. These are the cells responsible for laying down scar tissue. Therefore, the chronic consumption of salty, processed meats creates an environment where the liver is not only accumulating fat, but is also being signaled to build the scar tissue that defines cirrhosis. We must also confront the quality of the raw materials used in many of these products. While a high-end artisanal prosciutto might be made from whole muscle, the vast majority of mass-market processed meats, the hot dogs, chicken nuggets, and budget sausages, are products of mechanical separation. This industrial euphemism describes a process where animal carcasses, often stripped of their prime cuts, are forced through high-pressure sieves to strip the remaining connective tissue, bone marrow, and fat from the bone. The resulting paste, often called pink slime, is a slurry of high-fat, low-quality protein. This slurry is then reconstituted with meat glue, transglutaminase, and fillers. The fat profile of this mixture is often heavily skewed towards saturated fats, specifically palmitic acid, which is known to be lipotoxic to liver cells. Unlike the fat found in a lean cut of steak, the fat in processed meat is often oxidized during processing and storage, meaning it enters the body already rancid on a molecular level, priming the liver for inflammation. The role of heme iron in processed red meats adds another layer of complexity to the toxicity profile. Iron is a necessary nutrient, but heme iron, the type found in blood and muscle, is highly bioavailable and in excess becomes a pro-oxidant. The body has no active mechanism to excrete excess iron. It must be stored. When a person consumes large quantities of red processed meat, the liver becomes overloaded with iron. Free iron catalyzes the Fenton reaction, a chemical process that generates hydroxyl radicals, some of the most destructive free radicals known to biology.
These radicals attack the lipid membranes of liver cells, causing lipid peroxidation. This is essentially the cell membrane going rancid from the inside out. This iron-induced oxidative stress acts as a fertilizer for fatty liver disease, accelerating the progression from simple steatosis, fatty liver, to steatohepatitis, NASH. The historical context of processed meat reveals a shift from survival necessity to convenience-based gluttony. For millennia, salting and curing were essential technologies to prevent starvation during winter. However, the consumption of these items was limited by supply and effort. Today, the industrialization of livestock and processing has made these nutrient-poor, toxin-rich foods the cheapest options in the supermarket. The bacon craze of the early 21st century, where bacon was added to everything from donuts to cocktails, exemplifies a cultural detachment from the biological reality of what this food does to the human system. We have fetishized a carcinogen. The marketing of processed meats often targets children, the Lunchable culture, normalizing the intake of nitrates and sodium at an age when the liver is still developing. This early exposure sets the metabolic stage for lifelong dysfunction. Moreover, the additives found in processed meats extend beyond nitrates. Phosphates are commonly added to retain moisture and improve texture. High dietary phosphate intake has been linked to accelerated aging and vascular damage, and emerging evidence suggests it may disrupt liver metabolism. Additionally, the use of smoke flavorings, chemical condensates of wood smoke, introduce polycyclic aromatic hydrocarbons, PAHs, into the diet. PAHs are environmental pollutants that the liver must detoxify. By consuming smoked deli meats, we are voluntarily ingesting the same class of toxins found in cigarette smoke and car exhaust, forcing the liver to divert its resources to detoxification pathways rather than metabolic regulation. The impact of processed meats on the gut microbiome is also catastrophic. The preservatives designed to kill bacteria in the meat, sodium nitrate and high salt concentrations, do not stop working once swallowed. They continue their antimicrobial action in the gut, decimating populations of beneficial commensal bacteria. This dysbiosis favors the growth of salt-tolerant inflammatory bacterial species. As discussed in previous entries, a compromised gut microbiome leads to a leaky gut,
allowing bacterial endotoxins to flood the liver. Processed meat, therefore, represents a double hit. It provides direct chemical toxins, nitrosamines, and indirect inflammatory signals via the gut-liver axis. It is also critical to debunk the keto or low-carb halo that sometimes protects processed meats. In the rush to demonize carbohydrates, many dietary trends have given a free pass to bacon, sausage, and pepperoni because they are low in sugar. This is a dangerous oversimplification. While reducing sugar is vital for liver health, replacing it with processed, nitrate-rich meats is trading one metabolic insult for another. A liver congested with fat from insulin resistance, sugar, looks remarkably similar to a liver congested with fat from inflammatory lipotoxicity, processed meats. The endpoint, fibrosis and failure, remains the same. The belief that one can achieve metabolic health while consuming industrial slurry wrapped in a casing is a fallacy promoted by a food industry desperate to maintain market share. Ultimately, processed meat is an artifact of an industrial food system that prioritizes shelf life and palatability over human biology. It is a product where the nutritional value of the original animal protein is completely overshadowed by the toxicity of the processing agents. Every slice of bologna, every hot dog, and every strip of chemically cured bacon places a measurable strain on hepatic function. For the patient with Nafld or anyone seeking to prevent it, these foods act as inflammatory accelerants, fueling the fire of metabolic disease with every bite.
6. The white death, white bread and refined carbs. If processed meat is the assassin, refined carbohydrates are the army. Entry number 6, white bread and refined carbs, represents the single most pervasive source of metabolic disruption in the modern diet. This category includes white bread, bagels, pizza crusts, pasta, white rice, crackers, and the flour tortillas that wrap our burritos. These foods constitute the base of the USDA food pyramid for decades, yet they are biologically equivalent to injecting sugar directly into the bloodstream. The danger of white flour lies not in what it is, but in what it has lost. Through the process of industrial milling, the wheat kernel is stripped of its soul, the bran and the germ, leaving behind only the endosperm, a pure sugar bomb. For the liver, the consumption of these refined grains triggers a cascade of hormonal and biochemical events that are the primary drivers of de novo lipogenesis, the creation of new liver fat from sugar. To comprehend the magnitude of this threat, we must look at the biochemistry of starch digestion. Starch is simply a long chain of glucose molecules held together by weak bonds. In whole grains, this starch is encased in a fibrous matrix, the bran, and accompanied by healthy fats and proteins, the germ. This structure requires mechanical and enzymatic effort to break down, resulting in a slow, steady release of glucose into the bloodstream. White flour, however, is essentially pre-digested. The fibrous armor has been removed, and the particles have been pulverized into a fine dust. When you eat a slice of white bread, the enzyme amylase in your saliva begins breaking it down into glucose before you even swallow. By the time it reaches the small intestine, it is absorbed with explosive speed. This causes a massive vertical spike in blood glucose. The body's response to this glucose tsunami is the release of insulin from the pancreas. Insulin is the storage hormone. Its job is to clear sugar from the blood to prevent toxicity. When a massive load of glucose from refined carbs hits the system, insulin levels skyrocket. This hyperinsulinemia is the master switch for liver fat accumulation. High insulin tells the liver two things. First, stop burning fat immediately. Second, take this excess sugar and convert it into triglycerides. This process, de novo lipogenesis, is incredibly efficient.
The liver takes the glucose derived from the bagel or the pasta and weaves it into palmitic acid, a saturated fat that is then stored in lipid droplets within the hepatocyte. This is the physiological reality. Eating fat does not necessarily make the liver fatty, but eating refined carbohydrates guarantees it. The historical pivot point for this dietary catastrophe was the invention of the high-speed steel roller mill in the late 19th century. Before this, stone milling created a flour where the germ and bran were never fully separated from the starch. The resulting bread was dense, darker, and spoiled relatively quickly due to the oils in the germ. The roller mill allowed for the complete separation of the components, creating a pristine, white, shelf-stable powder. This was hailed as a miracle of food security and purity. In reality, it was the first step in the mass castration of our food supply. We remove the fiber, which protects the liver, the magnesium, crucial for insulin sensitivity, and the vitamin E, an antioxidant, leaving only pure energy. To compensate, governments mandated enrichment, spraying synthetic vitamins back onto the white dust. But they could not spray back the fiber or the complex biological matrix. We created a frankenfood that the human metabolism perceives as a drug. The insidiousness of refined carbs lies in their blandness. We are evolutionarily wired to seek out sweet things, signaling safe energy. But white bread, pasta, and rice are savory or neutral. We do not perceive them as candy, yet biologically they act exactly like it. A bowl of unsweetened cornflakes raises blood sugar faster than a bowl of table sugar. This invisible sugar allows people to consume massive quantities of glucose without triggering the too sweet nausea response. A person would struggle to eat 10 tablespoons of sugar, but they can easily eat 3 slices of pizza, which delivers a similar glucose load to the liver. This disconnect between sensory input and metabolic reality is a key driver of the obesity and fatty liver epidemic. Furthermore, the lack of fiber in refined carbohydrates disrupts the gut-liver axis. Fiber is the primary food source for the beneficial bacteria in the colon. When we consume a diet dominated by white flour, we starve these bacteria. In their absence, the mucin layer of the gut lining thins and the integrity of the intestinal barrier is compromised.
This leads to the leaky gut phenomenon described earlier, where bacterial endotoxins translocate to the liver, driving inflammation.
Additionally, the fermentation of fiber by gut bacteria produces short-chain fatty acids like butyrate, which have been shown to improve insulin sensitivity and reduce liver fat. By removing fiber from our staple foods, we have removed a critical metabolic brake, allowing the liver to accelerate toward disease. The cultural entrenchment of refined carbs makes them the hardest addiction to break. They are the substrate of comfort food. From French baguettes to Italian pasta to Asian white rice, these foods are woven into the identity of nations. However, the modern versions of these foods are vastly different from their ancestral counterparts. The wheat has been hybridized for higher yield and gluten content, the rice is more highly polished. Moreover, we consume them in quantities that would have been impossible for our ancestors. The staff of life has become a bludgeon. The low-fat era of the 1980s and 90s exacerbated this, as health authorities demonized butter and eggs while promoting pretzels, bagels, and pasta as heart-healthy because they were fat-free. We now know that this advice fueled the explosion of NAFLD as the population replaced satiating fats with lipogenic carbs. The interaction between refined carbs and fructose from the soda discussed in entry number 1 creates a metabolic double whammy. Often, these foods are consumed together, a burger on a white bun with a soda. The glucose from the bun stimulates insulin, which puts the liver in storage mode. The fructose from the soda provides the raw material for fat production. The high insulin prevents the liver from breaking down the fructose-generated fat. It is a perfect self-reinforcing trap. The liver is bombarded with energy it cannot burn and cannot export fast enough. The result is the foie gras effect in humans. We must also consider the role of gluten, specifically in the context of modern high-yield wheat. While celiac disease is a specific autoimmune condition, there is growing evidence of non-celiac gluten sensitivity and GCS contributing to systemic inflammation. Gliadin, a protein in gluten, has been shown to increase intestinal permeability via the release of zonulin even in healthy individuals. For a liver already under stress, the daily assault of inflammatory proteins crossing a leaky gut barrier adds a significant burden.
The daily bread thus becomes a daily dose of inflammatory signaling. Finally, the addiction to refined carbs is physiological. The rapid spike in blood glucose is followed by a rapid crash as insulin overcompensates. This crash, hypoglycemia, triggers stress hormones like cortisol and adrenaline and induces intense cravings for more quick energy. The brain screams for another bagel, another cookie, another bowl of rice. This creates a roller coaster of blood sugar peaks and valleys that keeps insulin levels chronically elevated. As long as insulin is high, the liver is locked in fat accumulation mode. It is physically impossible to heal fatty liver while riding the glucose roller coaster. In conclusion, white bread and refined carbohydrates are not benign fillers, they are metabolic disruptors of the highest order. They represent the industrial stripping of nutrition for the sake of convenience and shelf life, a trade-off that our livers are paying for with fibrosis and failure. To heal the liver, one must return to the complexity of whole unrefined plants, rejecting the white powder that has become the foundation of the modern diseased diet. The great white hazard is real, and it is likely sitting in your pantry right now.
7. The sweet trinity: candy, cakes, and pastries. If the modern diet were a weapons system designed to annihilate metabolic health, the category of candy, cakes, and pastries would be its nuclear warhead. This entry represents the ultimate convergence of the three most potent drivers of non-alcoholic fatty liver disease: Nafld, refined flour, refined sugar, and industrial fats. While previous entries in this investigation have dealt with these elements in isolation or partial combination, the world of confectionery and baked goods relies on their synergistic fusion to create hyper-palatable treats that override every satiety mechanism the human body possesses. When you consume a donut, a slice of frosted cake, or a chocolate bar, you are not merely ingesting calories, you are subjecting your liver to a simultaneous assault of glucose, fructose, and triglycerides that forces the organ into a state of immediate and frantic fat production. This is the sweet trinity, a biochemical trap that has transformed the occasional historical indulgence into a daily driver of the global steatosis epidemic. To understand the unique danger of this category, we must analyze the specific metabolic interplay between its components. A pastry, such as a croissant or a Danish, is essentially a matrix of refined starch, glucose, layered with fat. When this is coated in sugar or filled with fruit jam, fructose, it creates a perfect storm for the liver. Upon ingestion, the refined flour and sugar cause a massive, rapid spike in blood glucose. The pancreas responds by flooding the bloodstream with insulin. As we have established, insulin is the storage hormone. It unlocks the doors of the cells to accept energy and, crucially, it inhibits the breakdown of fat. In this high insulin environment, the body cannot burn the fat contained in the pastry. Instead, that dietary fat is shuttled directly into storage. Simultaneously, the fructose component of the sugar, which can only be metabolized by the liver, is providing the raw substrate for de novo lipogenesis. The liver is thus receiving a signal to store fat from insulin, receiving the raw materials to make new fat from fructose, and receiving a direct delivery of dietary fat from the butter or oil. It is a triple threat that overwhelms the hepatocyte's capacity to regulate lipid balance. The industrial chemistry involved in modern baking adds another layer of toxicity.
The fat in commercial cakes, cookies,
And frostings is rarely just butter. For decades, the industry relied on partially hydrogenated oils, trans fats, because they provided structure, shelf life, and a specific mouthfeel that butter could not replicate at a low cost. While trans fats have been largely legislated out of the food supply due to their undeniable link to heart disease and liver inflammation, their replacements are hardly benign. The industry has pivoted to interesterified fats and palm oil derivatives. These highly processed fats are engineered to be solid at room temperature, mimicking the properties of saturated fat. However, the metabolic impact of these engineered lipids on the liver is still being unraveled. Early research suggests that interesterified fats may induce blood sugar dysregulation and liver fat accumulation just as efficiently as the trans fats they replaced. Furthermore, the oxidation of these fats during the high-heat baking process creates lipid peroxidation products, introducing oxidative stress directly into the liver cells. The concept of cellular stress is vital here. The sheer caloric density of candy and pastries creates a burden on the endoplasmic reticulum, ER, of the liver cell. The ER is the organelle responsible for folding proteins and synthesizing lipids. When the liver is flooded with the substrate from a sugary fatty meal, the ER becomes overwhelmed, a state known as ER stress. In response, the cell activates the unfolded protein response, UPR, a safety mechanism that, if chronically activated, triggers inflammation and cell death, apoptosis. This is one of the key mechanisms by which simple fatty liver progresses to non-alcoholic steatohepatitis, NASH. The daily consumption of snack cakes, those plastic-wrapped cream-filled sponges found in every gas station and vending machine, keeps the liver in a perpetual state of ER stress. The organ never gets a reprieve, never gets a chance to clear the backlog of unfolded proteins or accumulated lipids. We must also investigate the role of advanced glycation end products, AGEs, in this category. AGEs are formed when sugars react with proteins or fats under heat, the very reaction that gives a cake its golden crust or a cookie its brown edge, the Maillard reaction. While this reaction creates delicious flavors and aromas, the resulting compounds are biological irritants. When we consume foods high in dietary AGEs, the liver is tasked with filtering them.
These compounds can bind to receptors on liver cells, RAGEs, triggering a signaling cascade that promotes inflammation and fibrosis. Essentially, by eating highly processed, high-sugar baked goods, we are ingesting sticky molecules that gum up the metabolic machinery and accelerate the aging of the liver tissue. This sugar aging or glycation is a major contributor to the stiffening of liver tissue seen in advanced liver disease. The psychological and neurological engineering of these foods cannot be overstated. The combination of sugar and fat found in a chocolate bar or a slice of cheesecake targets the brain's reward system with the precision of a narcotic. It triggers the release of dopamine in the nucleus accumbens, creating a sensation of intense pleasure and relief. This is the bliss point. The food industry employs food scientists to optimize this ratio, ensuring that the product is just sweet enough and just fatty enough to maximize the craving without inducing the stop signal of nausea. This leads to a loss of homeostatic control. A person can consume 1,000 calories of cake, half a day's energy, in minutes without feeling full in the traditional sense. This caloric surplus is invisible to the appetite centers, but devastatingly visible to the liver, which must process every gram of excess energy into visceral fat. The cultural normalization of dessert has played a massive role in the epidemic. Historically, refined sugar and white flour were expensive luxuries, reserved for weddings, feast days, and royalty. A cake was a rare event. Today, the birthday cake has morphed into the office birthday cake, the weekend treat, the after-dinner ritual, and the coffee break snack. We have ritualized the consumption of hepatotoxic foods to the point where abstaining is seen as antisocial. The marketing of candy and snacks to children is particularly insidious. By introducing the developing liver to massive loads of fructose and industrial fats at a young age, we are conditioning the organ for dysfunction. A child who consumes a diet heavy in fruit snacks, cookies, and cupcakes is developing a fatty liver phenotype before they even reach puberty. We are seeing adolescents with the liver profiles of middle-aged alcoholics, driven entirely by the candy and pastry aisle. Moreover, the ingredients list of modern confectionery reads like a chemistry textbook, beyond the sugar and fat.
These products are loaded with emulsifiers like polysorbate 80 and carboxymethylcellulose to improve texture and shelf life. Emerging research indicates that these emulsifiers can erode the mucus layer of the gut, leading to intestinal permeability, leaky gut, and microbiome dysbiosis. As we have seen in previous entries, a leaky gut allows bacterial toxins to travel to the liver, fueling inflammation. Artificial colors, red 40, yellow 5, and preservatives, BHT, BHA, add to the chemical load the liver must detoxify. The liver perceives these additives as xenobiotics, foreign substances, and must expend energy and antioxidant resources to neutralize them, diverting resources away from metabolic regulation. The donut warrants a specific mention as perhaps the single most destructive food item in this category. It represents the unholy union of all liver-damaging elements: a ring of refined white flour, entry number 6, deep-fried in oxidized vegetable oil, entry number 4, and coated in a glaze of pure sugar, entry number 7. It is a calorie bomb that delivers trans fats, or their oxidized replacements, lipid peroxides, acrylamide, and a massive fructose load simultaneously. To eat a donut is to attack the liver from every possible biochemical angle. It is a testament to the resilience of the human body that we can survive eating them at all, yet the rising rates of liver failure suggest that this resilience has a limit. Ultimately, candy, cakes, and pastries are not food, they are entertainment. They offer no nutritional value, no essential amino acids, no vitamins, no fiber. They are pure, concentrated metabolic disruption. They exist to stimulate the pleasure centers of the brain while wreaking havoc on the filtration system of the body. In the fight against fatty liver disease, the elimination of this category is often the single most effective intervention. By removing the sweet trinity, we remove the primary driver of de novo lipogenesis, allowing the liver to finally shift from storage mode to burning mode. Until we recognize these items as biological toxins rather than harmless treats, the liver will continue to silently suffocate under the weight of our confectionery addiction.
8. The Trojan horse, sweetened coffee drinks. In the pantheon of metabolic deceivers, the sweetened coffee drink stands alone as the most successful Trojan horse of the modern diet. Unlike a candy bar or a burger, which most consumers recognize as indulgences, the coffee drink is often categorized mentally as fuel, energy, or a necessary morning ritual. It rides on the coattails of coffee's reputation as a healthy, antioxidant-rich beverage. Indeed, black coffee is scientifically proven to be hepatoprotective. It reduces liver inflammation and lowers the risk of fibrosis. However, the beverages sold by global coffee chains and fast food drive-thrus are not coffee in any functional sense. They are liquid desserts, milkshakes in disguise, delivering a payload of sugar and fat that often exceeds that of a soda or a fast food meal. Entry number 8 is a critical investigator focus because it represents the invisible calories that are driving Nafld in demographics that might otherwise consider themselves health conscious. The biochemical danger of the sweetened coffee drink, the frappe, the mocha, the caramel macchiato, the pumpkin spice latte, lies in its delivery system, liquid sugar combined with high-fat dairy. As with soft drinks, the liquid nature of the sugar ensures rapid gastric emptying. There is no fiber to slow down digestion. The fructose from the syrups hits the liver with the force of its tsunami. But unlike a soda, these drinks are also loaded with fat from whole milk, whipped cream, and drizzles. This combination creates a metabolic paradox. The sugar spikes insulin, shifting the liver into fat storage mode. The dietary fat from the cream provides the immediate substrate for that storage. And the caffeine adds a third, stress-inducing dimension. Caffeine is a stimulant that triggers the release of cortisol and adrenaline. These are the body's fight-or-flight hormones. Physiologically, cortisol mobilizes glucose, releasing it from the liver into the bloodstream to fuel muscles for an escape. However, when you are sitting in a car or at a desk sipping a 600-calorie latte, you are not fighting or fleeing, you are sedentary. The caffeine-induced cortisol spike raises blood sugar further, adding to the glucose load from the syrups. High cortisol is specifically linked to the deposition of visceral fat, the deep, dangerous belly fat that surrounds the liver. Therefore,
A sweetened coffee drink creates a unique hormonal environment, high insulin from sugar plus high cortisol from caffeine. This is the biochemical recipe for maximum visceral adiposity. You are chemically signaling your body to store fat in the liver. Let us dissect the anatomy of a typical seasonal coffee beverage. A venti, or large size, can contain upwards of 60 to 80 grams of sugar. That is 15 to 20 teaspoons, 3 to 4 times the recommended daily limit for added sugar, consumed in 20 minutes. This sugar comes from pumps of highly concentrated syrup. These syrups are often made with high fructose corn syrup, HFCS, because it is cheaper and mixes better in cold liquids than sucrose. As we have exhaustively detailed, HFCS is the primary driver of liver fat production. The drink is then diluted with milk. While milk contains protein, it also contains lactose, milk sugar, and if whole milk is used, saturated fat. Finally, it is topped with sweetened whipped cream and a drizzle of caramel or chocolate sauce, which is essentially pure sugar and fat. The result is a 500-plus calorie bomb that provides zero satiety. Because it is liquid, the brain does not register it as a meal. A person can drink a frappuccino at 10 a.m. and still eat a full lunch at noon, completely unaware that they have already consumed a dinner's worth of calories. The third wave coffee culture, which originally focused on the quality of the bean and the art of the roast, has been hijacked by the desertification of breakfast. The global coffee chains have realized that sugar sells better than bitterness. They have engineered a palate shift, training an entire generation to associate the taste of coffee with the taste of a milkshake. This is particularly damaging to the liver because these drinks are often consumed in the fasting state, first thing in the morning. Breaking an overnight fast with a massive load of liquid fructose is the worst possible way to start the metabolic day. The liver, which has been quietly doing its housekeeping during sleep, is suddenly slammed with a toxic load. This spikes oxidative stress markers immediately and sets the tone for insulin resistance throughout the rest of the day. The pumpkin spice phenomenon and other seasonal marketing strategies add a layer of psychological urgency to the consumption. These drinks are marketed as limited-time emotional experiences, fall in a cup, holiday cheer.
This emotional branding bypasses rational dietary choices. Consumers feel they are participating in a cultural moment, masking the reality that they are ingesting a liver-toxic sludge. The health halo is also manipulated through skinny versions or the use of plant milks.
A latte made with oat milk is often perceived as healthier, but commercially produced oat milk is essentially liquefied starch, maltose, often containing seed oils, rapeseed canola for texture. Maltose spikes blood sugar even faster than glucose, so an oat milk vanilla latte can actually be more glycemic than the dairy version, causing a sharper insulin spike and driving liver fat accumulation just as aggressively. We must also consider the sheer volume of these beverages. In the 1950s, a standard coffee cup was 6 to 8 ounces. Today, the standard to-go size is 16 to 20 ounces, with 30-ounce iced versions being common. This volume expansion means that even if the sugar concentration were moderate, the total load is massive. The liver doesn't care about concentration. It cares about the total number of fructose molecules it must metabolize. A 24-ounce frozen coffee drink delivers a toxic dose of fructose that overwhelms the liver's ATP reserves, leading to uric acid production and mitochondrial dysfunction. This is drinking your liver dry of its energy and antioxidant capacity. The addiction potential of the sugar-caffeine combination is potent. Sugar releases dopamine, caffeine blocks adenosine, the chemical that makes you feel tired, and releases dopamine as well. This double dopamine hit creates a powerful reinforcement loop. The caffeine crash is often actually a sugar crash, reactive hypoglycemia. 2 hours after the drink, blood sugar plummets, causing shakes, irritability, and brain fog. The user interprets this as needing more coffee and returns for another sugary drink, perpetuating the cycle. This roller coaster keeps insulin levels chronically elevated, locking the liver in a permanent state of lipogenesis. Furthermore, the hidden calories in these drinks are a primary cause of the unexplained weight gain seen in many patients. A person may eat a clean diet of salads and grilled chicken, but fail to lose weight or improve their liver enzymes because they are drinking 800 calories of liquid sugar and fat every day. They view the coffee as neutral water, a free pass. Investigative analysis of the nutritional data from major chains reveals that some coffee drinks contain more sugar than a liter of cola and more saturated fat than a burger. They are metabolic disruptors masquerading as beverages. The tragedy of entry number 8 is that it corrupts a beneficial substance. Coffee, in its pure form, black or with a splash of real cream, is one of the few superfoods for the liver. It contains polyphenols like chlorogenic acid that have been shown to reduce liver stiffness and lower liver enzyme levels. But when we bury those polyphenols under mountains of HFCS, artificial flavors, and oxidized fats, we negate the benefit and replace it with toxicity. We have turned a medicine into a poison. In the final analysis, the sweetened coffee drink is a symbol of the modern metabolic disconnect. We want the energy without the bitterness. We want the indulgence without the consequence. But the liver keeps the score. Every pump of vanilla syrup, every swirl of caramel, every dollop of whipped cream is a transaction that the liver pays for with inflammation. The rise of Nafld in young professionals and students, demographics that practically live on these beverages, is a testament to the destructive power of this Trojan horse. To protect the liver, we must dismantle the idea that a 20-ounce cup of sugar and fat is a viable way to start the human day. We must return to coffee as a bitter, complex bean, not a vehicle for the dessert industry to smuggle calories into our morning routine.
9. The creamy trap, high-fat dairy and the saturated burden. In the hierarchy of nutritional controversies, few categories are as polarized as dairy. For decades, it was championed as the bedrock of bone health, a calcium-rich necessity for growth. Then, it was demonized for its fat content during the lipid hypothesis era of the 1980s. Today, the pendulum has swung again, with some dietary camps embracing full-fat dairy as a healthy fat. However, when investigating the specific pathology of non-alcoholic fatty liver disease, Nafld, particularly in the context of the modern hypercaloric Western diet, high-fat dairy, specifically in its most processed and sugar-laden forms like ice cream and sweetened yogurts, occupies a perilous position. Entry number 9 is not an indictment of the cow, but rather an investigation into how the unique combination of saturated fatty acids, insulinogenic proteins, and often added sugars found in modern dairy products can accelerate hepatic steatosis in metabolically sensitive individuals. The ice cream pint is the emblem of this category, a dense brick of energy that delivers a specific type of fat, palmitic acid, that is uniquely toxic to liver cells when consumed in excess. To understand the risk, we must zoom in on the molecular structure of milk fat. Approximately 70%.
A diet heavy in high-fat dairy does not just make the liver fatty, it actively stresses and kills liver cells through ceramide accumulation. The danger of high-fat dairy is exponentially amplified by the matrix in which it is consumed. If one were to eat a piece of raw fermented cheese, the impact might be negligible or even neutral due to the fermentation byproducts like vitamin K2 and the lack of carbohydrates. However, the dominant form of high-fat dairy in the American diet is ice cream. Ice cream is a metabolic weapon. It combines high levels of palmitic acid from heavy cream with massive amounts of refined sugar, sucrose, fructose. This combination is devastating. The sugar spikes insulin to super physiological levels. The insulin opens the floodgates for fat storage. The cream provides the fat. Because insulin is high, the liver cannot burn the palmitic acid, it must store it. Simultaneously, the fructose component of the sugar drives de novo lipogenesis, creating more saturated fat from scratch. The result is a liver that is being stuffed with fat from two sources at once while being hormonally locked out of burning any of it. This sugar-fat combination is rarely found in nature. Breast milk is the only closest analog, designed to make infants grow rapidly, and it triggers a primal, uncontrollable consumption drive in adults. We must also analyze the insulinogenic properties of dairy proteins, whey and casein. Dairy is unique in that it stimulates a robust insulin response even in the absence of carbohydrates. This is an evolutionary feature designed to promote growth in calves. Whey protein in particular spikes insulin significantly. When you consume a premium ice cream or a frappe, linking back to entry number 8, you are getting the insulin spike from the sugar plus the insulin spike from the dairy protein. This creates a hyperinsulinemic environment that is arguably more intense than that produced by sugar alone. For a person with a healthy liver, this might be manageable, but for the millions of Americans with pre-existing insulin resistance or lean fatty liver, this insulin surge is the final nail in the coffin. It ensures that every gram of fat consumed in that sitting is sequestered into the liver and adipose tissue. The industrial processing of dairy also warrants scrutiny. Modern commercial dairy is vastly different from the milk consumed a century ago. It comes from cows bred for maximum yield,
Often fed corn and soy rather than grass. This alters the fatty acid profile of the milk, reducing the levels of anti-inflammatory omega-3s and conjugated linoleic acid, or CLA, while increasing the proportion of inflammatory fats. Furthermore, the processes of pasteurization and homogenization fundamentally alter the physical structure of the milk fat globule. Homogenization smashes the fat globules into microscopic particles to prevent the cream from separating. Some researchers hypothesize that these tiny membrane-free fat droplets are absorbed differently in the gut, bypassing normal digestive checkpoints and delivering fat more rapidly to the liver. While this theory is debated, the correlation between the rise of processed homogenized dairy and metabolic disease is a timeline that cannot be ignored. The cultural narrative surrounding dairy, the calcium myth, has shielded these products from scrutiny. For decades, the dairy lobby has successfully marketed products like chocolate milk, sweetened yogurts, and cheese dips as essential for bone health. This health halo allows consumers to justify the consumption of products that are essentially desserts. A fruit-on-the-bottom yogurt can contain as much sugar as a candy bar. When made with whole milk, it becomes a high-sugar, high-fat delivery system. The consumer believes they are doing something good for their skeleton, while their liver is struggling to metabolize the fructose palmitate load. This cognitive dissonance is a major barrier to dietary change. Parents feed their children ice cream and cheesy pasta under the guise of nutrition, unknowingly priming the pediatric liver for early-onset steatosis. There is also the issue of full-fat cheese as a staple of the fast food and processed food ecosystem. While high-quality artisan cheese is one thing, the cheese found on pizzas, burgers, and nachos is often a processed dairy product containing emulsifiers, sodium phosphates, and vegetable oils mixed with milk solids. This cheese product is a delivery vehicle for sodium and saturated fat without the protective matrix of fermented nutrients. The sheer volume of cheese consumption in the US has skyrocketed, from 11 pounds per person in 1970 to nearly 40 pounds today. This increase tracks almost perfectly with the obesity and NAFLD curves. When cheese is melted over refined carbohydrates, pizza crust, white bread, pasta, it recreates the sugar-fat trap described with ice cream.
The refined carbs spike insulin, and the cheese provides the calorie-dense fat for storage. It is the context of consumption that turns dairy from a potential nutrient source into a liver hazard. The keto trend has recently exacerbated this issue. In the rush to embrace low-carb living, many people have dramatically increased their intake of heavy cream, butter, and cheese, often without eliminating carbohydrates sufficiently to enter true ketosis, or while consuming keto treats full of artificial sweeteners. For someone with a damaged liver, loading up on saturated fat, even in the absence of sugar, can be problematic if the liver's mitochondrial function is impaired. A damaged liver cannot oxidize fat efficiently. Pouring heavy cream into the coffee of a person with NAFLD is like pouring gasoline on a fire that is struggling to burn. It simply adds to the backlog of lipid droplets. This phenomenon, sometimes called the keto stall or keto fatty liver, highlights that while carbohydrates are the primary driver, dietary fat is not chemically inert. It requires a functioning liver to process, and excess energy from any source will eventually burn the organ. Furthermore, we must consider the genetic component. A significant portion of the population carries variants of the APOE gene, like APOE4, or polymorphisms in the PPAR-alpha gene that make them poor metabolizers of saturated fat. For these individuals, a diet high in full-fat dairy leads to rapid spikes in LDL cholesterol and liver fat. This is not a one-size-fits-all scenario. What a pastoralist ancestor might have thrived on can be toxic to a sedentary modern office worker with a genetic susceptibility to hyperlipidemia. The blind recommendation of full-fat dairy ignores this genetic diversity and the sedentary reality of modern life. In the final analysis, high-fat dairy, particularly in its industrial, sugar-sweetened or hyperpalatable forms, ice cream, processed cheese, represents a dense caloric burden that the modern liver is ill-equipped to handle. It provides the building blocks for ceramide toxicity, stimulates an aggressive insulin response, and is almost always consumed in a caloric surplus. The creamy trap is the allure of texture and mouthfeel, a sensory delight that masks the cellular stress occurring within the hepatocyte. To heal the liver, one must respect the potency of palmitic acid and recognize that in the context of a high-energy diet,
That pint of ice cream is not a treat. It is a metabolic assault.
10. The engineered addiction, ultra-processed snacks. We arrive at the final entry, the endpoint of our culinary devolution, ultra-processed snacks. This category, encompassing potato chips, corn chips, cheese puffs, packaged cookies, crackers, and pretzels, is distinct from every other entry on this list because these items are not, strictly speaking, food in a biological sense. They are industrial formulations, edible substances synthesized from fractionated ingredients, starches, oils, protein isolates, and assembled using processes like extrusion and molding that have no equivalent in nature. They are designed with a singular purpose, to be hyperpalatable and impossible to stop eating. For the liver, these snacks represent a source of acellular carbohydrates and oxidized industrial oils that drive inflammation and fat accumulation with terrifying efficiency. They are the granular soldiers of the fatty liver epidemic, the fillers of the pantry, and the constant background radiation of the modern diet. The defining characteristic of ultra-processed snacks is their caloric density combined with a lack of satiety. Food scientists at companies like Frito-Lay have spent decades perfecting the bliss point, the precise ratio of salt, sugar, and fat that excites the brain's reward center, the amygdala, without triggering the satiety hormones, leptin, PYY, that tell you to stop. A bag of potato chips is essentially a bag of pre-digested starch soaked in fat. Because the structure of the potato has been destroyed, sliced paper thin or mashed into a slurry for Pringles, the surface area for digestion is massive. Upon chewing, the starch converts to glucose rapidly, beginning in the mouth. This hits the bloodstream with the speed of soda. However, unlike soda, the chips are 35 to 40% fat by weight. This fat is almost exclusively industrial seed oil, sunflower, corn, canola, or soybean. The oils used in snack foods are a critical vector of liver damage. These oils are rich in omega-6 fatty acids, linoleic acid. While essential in small amounts, the modern intake is 20 times the evolutionary norm. When these unstable polyunsaturated fats are used for frying chips at high industrial temperatures, they oxidize. As discussed in entry number 4, oxidized oils contain aldehydes and lipid peroxides, but in packaged snacks, these oils sit on the shelf for months to prevent them from going rancid to the taste.
They are treated with antioxidants like TBHQ, tertiary butyl hydroquinone, a synthetic preservative. However, once ingested, the massive load of omega-6 competes with anti-inflammatory omega-3s for enzymatic conversion in the liver, driving the production of pro-inflammatory eicosanoids. This puts the liver in a chronic state of low-grade inflammation, priming it for fibrosis. The chip is a delivery vehicle for inflammatory fats. A particularly insidious element of this category is the physical engineering of the food, specifically the concept of vanishing caloric density. This term, coined by food industry insiders, describes snacks like Cheetos or popcorn that melt in the mouth. When a food melts down rapidly, the brain is tricked into thinking the calories have vanished. It doesn't register the volume as substantial. This allows a person to consume an entire family-size bag, 1,200 calories of corn and oil, without feeling physically full. The stomach does not distend enough to signal the vagus nerve to stop eating. The liver, however, must deal with the reality of those 1,200 calories. It is flooded with substrate in a short window, forcing de novo lipogenesis. The air in the puffed snack is a metabolic illusion. The fat accumulation is real. The impact of ultra-processed snacks on the gut-liver axis is profound. These products are almost entirely devoid of fiber. A corn chip has had the hull of the corn removed. A cracker is made of white flour. Without fiber to feed the gut microbiome, the beneficial bacteria starve. To make matters worse, these snacks are laden with emulsifiers like soy lecithin, mono, and diglycerides to improve texture and shelf stability. Research has shown that these emulsifiers act like detergents in the gut, stripping away the protective mucus layer that lines the intestine. This allows bacteria to come into direct contact with the intestinal wall, causing inflammation and increasing permeability. Leaky gut. As the gut barrier fails, bacterial endotoxins, LPS, leak into the portal vein and travel to the liver. The liver of a chronic snacker is constantly bombarded by these toxins, which activate the immune system, Kupffer cells, and drive the progression from simple fatty liver to NASH. The psychological rewiring caused by these foods is perhaps their most dangerous attribute. We have moved from a culture of meals to a culture of grazing.
The liver requires periods of fasting, between meals and overnight, to clear out the fat and glycogen stored during the feeding window. This is when the liver performs autophagy, the cleaning out of damaged cells. Ultra-processed snacks have destroyed this cycle. Because they are shelf-stable, portable, and non-perishable, they are available 24/7. We snack at our desks, in our cars, and on the couch while watching TV. This grazing keeps insulin levels chronically elevated. The liver never gets the all-clear signal to switch to fat-burning mode. It is stuck in permanent storage mode. The ubiquity of the 100-calorie pack reinforces this, teaching us that constant eating is normal as long as the portions are small. But biologically, the constant drip feed of refined carbs and oils prevents metabolic flexibility. The manufacturing process of these snacks, extrusion cooking, is a form of thermal violence. A slurry of grain flour and water is subjected to high heat and extreme pressure, then forced through a die to create shapes, loops, puffs, flakes. This process destroys the food matrix and creates new synthetic chemical bonds. It gelatinizes the starches completely, making them instantly digestible, high glycemic index. It also denatures proteins, making them potentially more allergenic. We are eating pre-digested industrial matter. The human digestive tract evolved to break down whole foods. When we bypass this work, we disrupt the hormonal signaling that regulates metabolism. The pancreas dumps insulin in panic because the glucose hits the blood so fast. Culturally, these foods target the vulnerable. The marketing of chips and cookies is aggressively aimed at children and lower-income demographics. They are the cheapest calories in the supermarket. In food deserts, a bag of chips is often more accessible than a bag of apples. This creates a socioeconomic disparity in liver disease. We see higher rates of NAFLD in populations that rely on ultra-processed foods for sustenance. The global snack phenomenon means that as Western snack giants expand into developing nations, liver disease follows. The introduction of the potato chip to a traditional diet is often the harbinger of a metabolic health crisis. The addictive nature of the crunch cannot be ignored. Evolutionary biology suggests we associate crunch with freshness, crisp vegetables. The snack industry has hijacked this audio-tactile cue.
The sound of a crunch generates a specific frequency that the brain finds pleasurable. It keeps us interested in the food. If chips were silent, we would eat fewer of them. This audio engineering is part of the multisensory design used to override satiety. We are not eating because we are hungry. We are eating because we are being stimulated. The liver, unfortunately, cannot process stimulation. It can only process the chemical consequences. Finally, the sheer chemical load of additives, artificial flavors, MSG, colors, yellow 5, yellow 6, red 40, and preservatives adds to the liver's detoxification burden. While regulatory agencies deem these safe in isolation, we have no long-term data on the cocktail effect of consuming dozens of these synthetic compounds daily for decades. The liver is the clearinghouse for all xenobiotics. By forcing it to detoxify a stream of industrial chemicals, we divert its energy, ATP, and antioxidants, glutathione, away from managing fat and repairing DNA. We are distracting the liver with chemical noise, while simultaneously overloading it with caloric signal. In conclusion, ultra-processed snacks are the ultimate manifestation of a food system gone wrong. They are engineered to be overconsumed, designed to bypass satiety, and formulated with ingredients that are inherently inflammatory. They represent the final step in the alienation of humans from their natural diet. To heal the liver, one must break the addiction to the crinkle of the bag and the crunch of the chip. We must return to foods that rot, foods that require chewing, and foods that the liver recognizes as nutrition rather than industrial assault. The fatty liver epidemic is in many ways a symptom of our snack addiction, a biological protest against a synthetic diet. Epilogue: The Hepatic Awakening. This investigation has traversed the landscape of the modern diet, identifying the 10 agents of destruction that have turned the human liver into a reservoir of fat and fibrosis. From the liquid toxicity of soda and alcohol to the solid engineering of fast food and chips, the thread connecting them is clear: metabolic mismatch. We are exposing our ancient biology to a novel industrial environment it cannot comprehend. The liver is resilient. It is the only organ that can fully regenerate, but it cannot regenerate while under constant fire. The cure for non-alcoholic fatty liver disease is not found in a pill, but in the subtraction of these 10 toxins. It requires a return to whole, unprocessed, recognizable food. The choice is stark. We can continue to consume the products of industry and accept the slow necrosis of our vital organs, or we can revolt against the bliss point and reclaim our metabolic sovereignty. The health of the liver is the health of the human. The investigation is closed. The action is yours.